And hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Point Blank Podcast. As always, guys, joined with Dom. And today we're going to be speaking about an advert that has been circulating. And it's just another bit of propaganda that we seem to see all of the time with regard to terrorism. Now, terrorism, Dom, obviously a bad thing. And you probably have a sort of image of what a suspected terrorist is in your mind's eye. What they not necessarily what they look like, we won't be sort of prejudiced on that, but what their ideologies usually are. You can probably think of it straight away in your head. However, is the first thing that you think about a 13-year-old white boy?
Yeah, definitely not. I don't think the biggest threat in this country is 13-year-old white boys that are sharing content. Obviously exceptions do happen. This is the distinction we have to make. But exceptions don't break the rule. Now, if you were to look statistically at the historical representation of certain, groups in the United Kingdom that were responsible for terrorist attacks, you would have a very different image in your mind.
Well, statistically, and we like to deal with statistics and facts here on this channel, that the MI5's watch list is made up of 80% Islamic radicals that are on the watch list for terrorism in the United Kingdom. The other 20% is made up of other different sort of things, right? And far right is on there as well, right? But 80%, that's a large proportion. That is the vast majority of suspected terrorists in the UK or on watch lists that are from radical Islam. So why don't they use radical Islamists for these propaganda posters?
Well, simply put, Dan, they don't want to see themselves as being racist or prejudiced. Now, they're so ideologically woke that they won't even confront the elephant in the room and really, have fair representation when it comes to adverts like this. Now, these adverts shouldn't be targeted at young white boys. If we're going to look specifically at the statistics, that's probably one of the lowest offenders of terrorism in this country. So it's so interesting to see the diversity crowd want representation in, classic British, Downton Abbey shows. Yeah. They want representation in the Viking shows as well. But when it comes to actual, advertising, where they're trying to dissuade people from committing terrorist acts, then they don't want any representation there.
Well, this is the video that we're on about here. Let's have a little watch of it.
I just got all my devices taken away by the police. My mum couldn't believe it. I might get a criminal record and not be able to go to college. I only shared a link. I just thought it was funny. But it was terrorist content. And that is not a game. It's real life.
What you share leaves a trace. So what's this probably saying is obviously this young boy isn't sharing ISIS material. It's probably being deemed as he's sharing something to do with, I don't know, Tommy Robinson or something like that, right? Something like that. But again, it is genuinely gaslighting and using a false representation of a serious matter. Because yes, like many of the residents in the UK, I am, of course, want terrorism to be raised. But using the wrong individual for your propaganda, if it was even, say it was many different ones, and then you were using an example here, then perhaps people could get behind it. But when you're using just one sole advert, and it's this 13-year-old white boy, then people will start to smell a little bit of bullshit, and you can see that it's pure gaslighting.
Yeah, they love to do this type of representation stuff. For example, like I've seen many adverts from like the transport police of like people harassing people on the buses. Now, it's never, I never ever see, white people. And of course it happens, but, the vast majority of people getting harassed by people are of ethnic descent.
Or right? Migrants, right?
Or migrants, yeah, exactly. But they'll never use migrants in the video material, will they?
No, I also seen it as well. This is fucking funny. So obviously I did some time in the military, but there was a military harassment poster that was in the barracks. And it was like, they were like, giving awareness on different things, right? Like harassment. And in the poster, they had a white female who was like 4 foot flat, 5 foot flat, right? And then this like 6'7" black dude. And it was the poster was portraying that this young lady was sexually assaulting the black soldier in the poster. I'll try and get it up for the edit so you can see. But yeah, it's just this sort of false representation of everything. And this also, I mean, this has been going on for a very long time. And what we've seen is things like adolescence, you know, obviously this was a drama. But the way that the Labour Party pushed it was as if it was a documentary, as if it was gospel. It was pushing out for everybody in schools to watch it. And it was obviously portraying a young white boy who was an incel, essentially. It was a part of an incel and ended up killing a guy. I've never watched it. But regardless about it, it was a massive false representation. But the Labour government were pushing it as this was like the biggest threat to national security. This was the biggest threat to young women around the same time as the grooming gang scandal was erupting. And yeah, they were trying to sort of gaslight that this was the biggest threat. And people were buying into it. People were lapping it up. And someone, Ross Kemp, you know, Ross Kemp, obviously the documentary maker, known as Grant Mitchell in EastEnders, of course. He went out and made a docuseries following that adolescence drama, thinking that this was a massive threat. And I like Ross's documentaries. I used to watch them like on gangs and Afghanistan. I thought they were really, really good documentaries. But then I found out Ross is super woke. And I've got a glorious clip of the moment he finds out that he's basically been brainwashed and lied to, and that the situation that adolescence was creating was actually completely untrue. Let's have a watch of this clip quick.
Incels are a misogynistic group. Effectively, they hate women. How many incels have become killers?
We'd say roughly between 7 to 15 around the world.
Sorry, how many?
Estimates typically range from between 7 to 15 incel killers, and roughly 59 people have been killed in ideologically motivated incel killings.
In the United Kingdom?
Around the world.
Even one murder is too many, of course. But inceldom doesn't appear to be the phenomenon I thought it was. It's clear that this documentary needs to take a different direction.
So effectively, I have got everything wrong about incels. I think that they kill lots of girls globally and in the United Kingdom. I think they're a threat, a permanent threat to the security of this country. I think there are hundreds of thousands of them. I think that they are generally white and right-leaning. So all those preconceptions that I have are wrong.
Many of them, yes, and it's not your fault, Ross, because if you were to just pay attention to the media that is most often put out there about incels, it often espouses exactly the stereotypical depiction that you bought into at the beginning. So don't be too hard on yourself, but there is a lot of misinformation there about this topic that it's really good to appeal to the research.
I mean, that's pretty powerful when you're seeing that in real time. And to be fair, I'm surprised that the powers that be that made that documentary, obviously Ross has bosses, I'm surprised they allowed that to go out.
Yeah, it's quite shocking, obviously, to have this revelation. And really what that guy's saying is, if you listen to the media, you will be propagandized into thinking a specific way. And that's exactly what we're seeing. Like, let's not forget the timing of the adolescence drama series documentary. That was right after the Axel Rudabakana killings, right? Mm-hmm. You know, that is intentional. We have to realize that it's all intentional. And what he's really talking about incels don't hate women. They hate the system that has been created that puts them as second-class citizens in their own country, that puts people from other nations before them. They're not mad at women specifically. I think it might be part of it when a lot of these incels have like mass rejection, but it's part of the system that they were born and bred into. It's quite on a bit of a tangent here. I quite like this whole like looks maxing thing, because it's talking about these incels to ascend themselves, to make themselves, you know, look better, you know, be more charismatic and handsome and things like that. But you know, the government won't push this stuff, right? The government just labels them as incels, labels them as societal rejects, and then creates propaganda, basically positioning them in society as second-class citizens, pushing all the terrorist content and sort of blaming them. This is the type of rhetoric we've seen really since 2015. So if you look at keywords in news articles about white men, It really started to spike around 2014-15 and has been super high since. We have to understand why this is the case. White men have been scapegoated in society for the past decade. Why is that? This is to disillusion them. This is to remove their confidence in society. It's disgusting. And I think the tide is finally turning. People are starting to wake up to see this propaganda for what it is, propaganda, and to have pride in your history, to have pride in your race. There's nothing negative about being a white person, you know? And of course, many cultures have pasts, you know, but we shouldn't place the blame of, you know, past cultures on the people of today. Otherwise, obviously, the Middle Easterns who would take the Slavics as slaves, you never hear about that. But you only hear about the sort of the West African slave trade, right? It's all intentional propaganda.
Yeah, and I mean, it sort of follows on as well with Andrew Tate and his cancelling, right? So apparently, you know, due to the UK government, he was the sort of biggest threat to young children at the time, young boys. And they tried to psyop the rest of the country and make them believe that he was a genuine threat and he was creating these incels that were violent towards women. But as you can see from Ross's documentary, they are responsible for 13 deaths worldwide. I mean, again, that's not a security threat. That's more, I wouldn't even put that down to being an incel. I'd put that down to being an individual. If you're taking amount of numbers that someone is, right, you could look at that for trans, right, and say, how many trans people have killed someone this year? You look at that and then you go, okay, well, that's the problem. It's because they're trans. That's exactly what they're doing with that incel thing. But it's trying to take the spotlight away from what's there, which is also dangerous because it led to the whole covering up of the grooming gangs. Because if Ross did a documentary on that, they could probably see what a real threat to women actually are. And
yeah, they're cockroaches you don't want to unearth, right? Because it'd be you know, him and his producer team, they don't want to make enemies because clearly there's been massive institutional cover-up of the crimes committed by, immigrants and ethnic minorities in our country. And clearly there's some collaboration with the justice, the police departments, etc., being involved in these types of things. And obviously the higher up politicians and councillors of these constituencies. So, you know, that's a bigger target. So what Ross is doing is picking a weaker target and he's going, okay, let's bring some light on this.
But do you reckon Ross, okay, I'm going to, again, Mr. Devil's Advocate, you know, do you not think Ross might just be a victim of the propaganda? Instead of pushing the propaganda, do you think he could be a victim of it? Getting psyops by BBC, and he actually believed the rhetoric was coming out and actually believed that.
Yeah, you know, I'm actually of that mindset, right? Because this guy, firstly, he's open-minded. We know he's open-minded because he's having this conversation and he published it. Okay, so this guy said it's not your fault if you follow the mainstream, what's the word? Narrative. If you follow the mainstream narrative of what is being talked about by the threat of incels, by how they hate women, by people like Andrew Tate, who really have done a massive push to sort of dismantle the feminist architecture of society, then you will conclude that incels are the biggest threat to any Western nation. Well, if you follow the statistics and you follow people's experience as well, there'll be a very, very different answer.
Yeah. Guys, do let us know your thoughts on that down there in the comment section below. And as always, please do hit the like button and hit the subscribe button for more. We're very close to 20,000 subscribers, so sorry for being a Beggy Mitchell.